Everyone, this is Stephanie Liu, and welcome to another episode of Digital Confetti. Yes, where we're going to teach you all the amazing things on how you can repurpose your live stream and sprinkle it all across the internet so that way people can find out how amazing you are. So, hey, I've got something to ask you because this is going to be really fun. Here's the thing. My guess is since it's already Q1 of 2021, you probably don't want any more organic traffic. Or maybe, you know what, you probably don't want to benefit from having your site ranking higher in search for your target audience. You probably don't even want to dominate your industry. Or hold up, wait a second. Maybe you do. I do. Heck yeah, I do. And if that is definitely you, you're like, wait a second, Stephanie, this is exactly what I want. Then you are in luck because in this episode of Digital Confetti, I'm joined by the blogging brute himself, Mike Allton. You know that I absolutely adore him. He is actually my go-to for whenever I'm creating content. I'm like, hey, can you be my brain? That's literally what I send him in the DMs. Like, can you be my brain right now? Can you take a look at this? And let me make sure that this actually makes sense. So if you don't know Mike Allton, he has been crafting content strategy and churning out blog content for over a decade. That's pretty much longer than I have been live streaming. I was going to say something else, but we're going to behave. And so today he's going to walk us through on how to repurpose our live videos into long form blog content. Because here's the thing. I feel like most live streamers are like, okay, I just did a live stream. Boom, next, move on to the next show. And they don't give their content enough breathing room to actually get any of that SEO love, that engagement, and all the things. So today we're going to cover the why, the what, the how, and the what if, and then some. So we're talking strategy, tactics, tools, all the things. And it's really, honestly, this is all for you because let me tell you, whenever I want to, whenever I feel like it, I can always DM him and go, boop, 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 boop. Can you take a look at this? Am I right or am I right? Mike, does that actually happen?
That has happened on a couple of occasions. That has happened. And you said one thing that was wrong. You said, we're not going to have fun today. We're going to have fun. We're going to have a lot of fun.
Did I actually say that? That's so odd. Yeah. Why would I even say that?
I don't know.
I think I said we're going to behave today, right?
Oh, that's what it is. You said we're going to behave. And I was thinking, no, we're not going to behave at all.
We shall behave. All right. So if you're just tuning in, let us know where you're tuning in from. I am here in beautiful, sunny San Diego. The whole show, the internet, they knew that Mike was coming. And so they decided to rain this morning. And I was like, of course, because St. Louis is in the house. And that's where you are, right?
It's true.
Tell them exactly where you are. The pinpoint, the longitude, the latitude.
I am in Wildwood, Missouri. I look across my vista and I see forest and wildwood. It actually looks like Colorado, which I find fascinating. But it is raining and overcast today in St. Louis, like it usually is.
Got it. Well, good. So, hey, everyone, thanks for tuning in. We are talking about how to repurpose your live stream into long form content because, again, it's one of those things that I find that most live streamers don't do that. And so before we jump in, let me go ahead and give you a little bit of love. Mikey, go ahead and drink some water because I will show you your amazing, wonderful, beautiful Blogging Brute website. Because here's the thing, friends. Mike is an award-winning blogger, speaker, and author at the Social Media Hat and Blogging Brute. He's also the brand evangelist at Agora Pulse. So if you have been scheduling content, trying to have social inbox zero, that's definitely the place to go. He's been teaching this holistic approach to blogging for over a decade. He knows exactly what he's talking about. Anytime I need any SEO stuff, he's all about that. I'm not going to go too deep into his bio, even though I asked him this morning. I was like, hey, what's your bio? He's like, here's a short one and here's a long one. And I was like, well, I'm just going to ad-lib it. But having said that, I want to give I want to give a shout out to Shawnee. So Shawnee, yay, thank you so much for being here. Woo, 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 woo. Good. All right. So everyone, let's talk about your journey into live streaming. Because when you and I first met, you were definitely the blogging brute. You're like, I blog. It's like, I live stream. And I honestly didn't know if we were going to be friends because I was like, I don't know about this whole blogging thing. But somehow we convinced and we persuaded each other that, like, hey, when we combine powers, kind of like Captain Planet, here's Earth, wind, fire, blogging, live streaming. we have come together. So let's talk about how you started dabbling into live streaming itself.
Yeah, so that started for me a decade ago.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you're
Yeah.
like, Stephanie, you're still like an embryo when it comes to live streaming. I've been live streaming forever.
Because I'm old and you're not. Yeah, but it started on Google Plus because back in the day, Google Plus was a thing, and there were some people that liked using Google Plus, and Google Plus had integrated live streaming, multiple people live streaming. I think you could go 8 or 10 people at a time in a room. I mean, and that was native. I mean, it's crazy how far ahead of everybody else they were. And there were already shows back then.
Yeah.
Mia Voss had a show, Martin Shervington had a show, David Amerlin had a show, all these people that, names, probably people watching today don't recognize. But at the time, these guys were the movers and shakers on that particular platform. And me, I was just coming up, starting to blog, enjoying and writing. I wrote a lot about tools. I wrote a lot about the different platforms. And I started to watch these shows, and I started to make really smart comments. And I got on the radar of people like Mia Voss. And they said, oh, I see this person commenting on my live stream. I see Shoni. I see Michelle. They're making smart comments. They should be a guest on my show because I want them to talk live about what they're saying right now in the comments. So Mia would bring me on and we would talk about Evernote, and we would talk about Buffer and Hootsuite and the different platforms. And we actually had a drinking game. If I said the word tool on her show, everybody had to drink. It was a hilarious thing. But here's the point. I got on these shows. I had never done live streaming before, wasn't using this nice setup, but I got on the show, got into the habit of doing live streams, got in the habit of being a guest, and I got in front of their audiences. And my audience, the size and the scope of my audience just took off. I went from having a few thousand followers, as I recall, in Google Plus, to I had 250,000 by the time Google Plus stopped. And there was no Google Plus anymore. So that was a very sad day for me because I'd established this huge audience and this reputation as somebody who could not only write about and explain and teach these different concepts, but come on somebody's show and talk about it intelligently. So that's really where I got started with live streaming, was as a guest. And then eventually over the years, I started hosting my own shows. I did a series of summits, and I never really wanted to do a live show, right, like you do. I didn't want that commitment, I guess. But I did commit to doing summits. I did the first one probably 5 or 6 years ago. I did a weekly series and a panel. I had Guy Kawasaki and some other big names on these shows. And now I do them every single quarter for Agorapulse.
Yeah, that is true. I remember it was like pulling like teeth for you because you would always be a guest on everyone else's show. And I was like, you need to start your own show. And then you like wiggled through and you created your own weekly show, but for the company. And I'm still like, you need for you because you practically know everyone. I'm just going to name drop a Guy Kawasaki right now. Boom, boom, boom. Here we go. That's hilarious. All right. So shout out to Michelle Williams, who is here. Absolutely amazing. Wonderful to see you. We've got Texas. We've got Connecticut all up in here. And we've got family and friends tuning in from LinkedIn. Yay. So awesome. Amazing to have you here. So Mike, we've been talking about live streaming and just how it gives you an opportunity to really get to know others and really build that audience. And I find that as soon as the lights turn off, boom, like people are on to the next show. They're repurposing the content in other ways, but like ephemeral things where I'm just kind of like, okay, we're just going to, make a GIF or make a story and then it disappears. So what's the added benefit of actually recapping your live stream into a blog post?
I wonder what that benefit might be. And funny story, the first time I ever did this was after a Google Plus show. And this was when Jeff C., we both know, with the Manly Pinterest Tips, had started his own show. I think we were doing maybe once a month. And it started as a show. And it was Jeff and I and a couple of the guys, and we'd always bring in a guest. And so we'd go live to Google Plus, I think maybe simultaneously to YouTube. And one week we brought in Gary W. Goldstein, who was a contact of mine. And for those of you who don't know, Gary was the producer of Pretty Woman and Under Siege. So he's a big-time Hollywood producer. He was a great guest. I mean, this is just one of the most fabulous humans you could ever hope to talk to. He's so generous and giving and wise. and well spoken. So it was a terrific live stream, and I was captivated while we were all talking to him, because Jeff would ask a question, then Stefano Benny would ask a question, I'd ask a question. That's how it went. So while other people were asking questions, I'm typing notes. I've got Evernote open, just like I do right now, in another tab, and I'm typing in notes. And okay, Stefan asked this question, and Gary answered this, because I'm not on camera at the moment, or maybe I was, and that's okay. I can type and talk at the same time. So I'm recording the whole conversation. This is before we had transcription services and that sort of thing, right? So I'm recording the whole conversation, and within about 15 minutes after we ended the broadcast, I had a blog post ready to go, pushed it out, live, published it, and it's this wonderful recap of all these fantastic nuggets from Gary W. Goldstein, Hollywood producer. And you can bet people were interested in reading that. They didn't see the show. They missed it. You could go and search and find the recording. Not as easy to do as it is today, but they could come to the blog and they could read for themselves, and Google could scan for itself. Oh, this is what Gary had to say about starting a business, about developing a personal brand, about creating content that people really want to consume. And that's where I got the reputation of blogging brute. Jeff C. coined that. He's like, dude, you're some kind of blogging brute to have crafted that and published it within seconds. I mean, you're just basically got it out there. And that's true, I did. But the point there was I took that time. You don't have to do it while you're live. You don't even have to do it right after you go live. You know, you can get help. You can use a VA, you can use a transcription service today. But the key is that once that video is done, at some point soon after, you publish that blog post that lets people read who want to read. I don't always have time to sit through a 45-minute interview, and I'm betting a lot of your audience isn't going to want to sit through this entire interview after the fact just to find out what I had to say about creating blog content. I bet a good portion of your audience is going to want to skim. They're going to want to see the highlights, you know, and be able to just quickly go, oh, okay, oh, all right, this is worth my time. I'm going to invest a little more in reading what Mike had to say, or what Stephanie had to say, or what Michelle had to say on one of your videos. That's a good reason, one of many, but a good reason to create that written content, so that you give people that opportunity to skim and not force them to watch a 45-minute video and commit when they probably won't.
I absolutely agree. I find that when you're able to cater to your audience's learning style, the better it is. And if you're already going to start with a video first strategy, you might as well repurpose that content into long form content. But I mean, definitely shout out to Rose, who is saying that cool to hear this story, because what a writer can do relatively easily is that she also does this with live tweets. People do this with tweet chats. I remember I've been on a couple of tweet chats. There's this one writer, sorry, his name actually escapes me right now, but a week later, he will have recapped the entire tweet chat with embeds and everything in there. And I thought it was so cool to have that all put together. And so having said that, I want to give a quick shout out to Jim Hicks, who, Mike, by the way, he just wanted to jump in and say hi before he went on his meeting. So, hey, hopefully you get to wrap up your meeting soon, because that's going to be, you're absolutely going to love this, James. We always talk about like live streaming, and he actually just got his hands on the video script maker, if I remember correctly. So he is definitely one of those folks that are in the know. Mike, here's a question from you, and this is coming from Jack Ford. He's saying, what's one piece of advice would you give yourself if you could go back to the 5 minutes before your first live stream appearance? I want to hear this.
Okay. All right. Well, so a little bit of context and story. My very, very first live stream, before I started doing these Google Plus appearances, was a live stream. It was a private live stream where I was doing Hootsuite training, social media management training, to a group of lawyers. It was on Google Plus, but it was a private stream, and it was people who'd followed me on Google Plus, and they knew my expertise and experience and knowledge. And they said, Mike, we'd like you to come in and train us. Just like, you know, Stephanie, we have this mutual friend, Mitch Jackson, who does the same kind of structure. He teaches lawyers and he brings us in to talk to them all the time. But this was my very, very first time live streaming into a group like that. And I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified. I do not enjoy public speaking. I'm nervous now. I'm less nervous now than I was back then, because I've got that experience, right, of having done it successfully. But yeah, if I could have told myself then, with actual assurance that I was going to do well and this was going to be okay and people were going to appreciate not only my knowledge, but my ability to speak on camera. I didn't know if I could do this, right? I didn't know if I could come across well, if I could speak well, or if I would just kind of bumble over my words the whole time. I didn't know. And most people might tell themselves, you're going to be great. You're going to do just fine, right? But if you're doing something you've never done and you're trying to tell yourself that you're going to do great, you really can't trust yourself because you know you're not an actual expert in this. You know your own experience. You know you've never done this. So even though I might tell myself I'm going to be great, I can't trust myself. But yeah, so if I could go back in time, that would be it, is to be able to tell myself, you're actually going to be just fine. You're muted.
I was going to say, and it's going to lead to bigger and better opportunities because you even wrote a book.
Yeah.
You even wrote a book, which is awesome. Great. All right. So shout out to everyone who's here that are typing their questions in. We'll get to those. One question that I definitely want to ask you, Mike, is how do we figure out what content to add to our blog and how can we fit that into our future live show topics? Because I think you as a blogger, you have the foresight to be like, oh, here's a topic and here's my content pyramid of 13 other topics that I could write about to support that. What are your tips for someone who's like, okay, so if I do go the long form route, how do I go about this?
Yeah, I love that you mentioned content pyramid because that's the first really, really important concept. Now, for those of you who've never heard of it, you might have heard of a content silo or a content skyscraper. The idea is you're not just creating a single piece of content and hoping that it will rank. The idea here is that Google will look at all the content that you create about a particular topic. And the more content you have, the more interlinking that is going on within your site, the higher the entire body of work ranks. And I like this visualization of a pyramid where at the very top of the pyramid, you have a single page or post that is your most important post. If somebody wants to learn about a particular topic, let's say it's remote live production, that's where you want them to end up. Because that's the piece where not only they're going to learn everything there is to know about remote live production, but they're going to know that Stephanie's the person to talk to if they want to take their business the next step. And the same is true with everyone watching today. You all have businesses, you all have things that you want to be known for that are going to end up resulting in business results, sales, phone calls, subscribers, whatever the case might be. So that's your number one page. It's the top of the pyramid. And below that, I like to ideate 3 subtopics. Doesn't have to be 3. It could be any number. But I like 3. It's a nice number. So you come up with some subtopics that talk about that main topic, and you write content, pages, posts about that. And then you have blog content below that, usually 3 blog posts for each of those major subtopics. So as a result, like you said, now you've got 12 or 13 incredible pieces of content. They're all talking about this main topic and linking up. Oh, you found it. You are so clever. You found the visualization of the content pyramid so that at the top, you've got that pillar piece and all that link juice is flowing up and Google's recognizing it. And more importantly, all the traffic is flowing up. Those blog posts can be listicles, they can be interviews, they can be roundups, they can be all kinds of different things. They can be short, medium, long. It doesn't really matter as long as you're creating great content that answers questions and speaks to people and leads them up to the top of the funnel. So that's the most important concept first, is the content pyramid. But then you've got this question. All right, Mike, you told me I'm supposed to write 13 pieces of content. What am I supposed to actually write about? That's where you need a tool. I usually like to use SEMrush because SEMrush does a lot of the things, but it's not free. So if you want to start with free, that's okay. Sign up for a free Google Ads account. It's ads.google.com. You don't have to spend any money. You don't have to buy any ads. But a free Google Ads account is going to give you access to their free keyword planner. And the keyword planner, this is amazing. The keyword planner gives you access to the actual search results and the actual search data that is happening every single month. We all know Google is the number 1 search engine in the world. That's because people all around the world are going to Google every single second, and they're typing in something that they want to know. A solution to a problem, a fact, some piece of information, how to get from point A to point B. They want to know that information. And Google is tracking exactly how many times people each month put in the exact same search phrase. I can show you data. I can show you exactly if you put in a general topic like blogging, like remote live production, Google will say, oh, okay, here's how many times people searched on that specific phrase last month. And they'll tell you how much competition there is for that particular phrase. But then Google takes it a step further with the keyword planner, because what Google wants you to do is buy ads against these phrases. But again, you don't have to. What Google will show you is 10, 12, 100 other phrases related to what you just put in and how many people are searching for that particular phrase. Like if I punch in blogging in Keyword Planner, it'll tell me, there's thousands of people searching for blogging, but there's a ton of competition for blogging. But then Google will also tell me, hey, Mike, did you know that 1,000 people per month are searching for create a blog? And I already have a piece, a pillar piece called how to start a blog.
That's
so
right.
When I do some research, now I see, I already have a piece on how to start a blog. And guess what? Create a blog, that means the same thing. That's called semantic search. And Google's getting better and better every day at understanding the semantics of words, but it's not perfect. So if I go to my start a blog piece and I start to integrate create a blog here and there, I'm optimizing that piece for that particular keyword. Now I'm going to get this piece of content ranking even better. So there's that. But if you look through that list in Keyword Planner, you'll begin to identify all kinds of phrases that you can use to determine, number one, what should your actual topic be at the top of that keyword, at the top of that content pyramid? What should you be targeting? And then below that, what are some blog post ideas? Like I know start a blog is one of my pillar pieces, my content pyramid, top most important pieces. But I also know from my research, I could write a piece on how to start a mom blog, how to start a travel blog, how to start a food blog. These are all topics that people search. And these would make great blog posts for me that I would touch on, some specifics related to mom blogs or food blogs or travel blogs, and then lead them into, okay, now that you know what it takes to make a food blog, here's the nuts and bolts to actually start your blog.
Vladimir, so I was saying, you already got me looking at phrases now. I'm telling you guys, every episode of Digital Confetti, we're going to make you do something. We want you to take action. And Mike was definitely one of those people. So when I first started as a live streamer, and Caleb, who's probably watching too, I thought that I could get away with embed video blog posts, and then I'm just going to take the same description that I put in the social media post or like the video description, and then boom, 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 done, right? And then I meet Mike, and he's like, nah, girl, if you want to rank for certain keywords, you have to expand this a lot more. And so when he first showed me that content pyramid, I was like, okay, so now we have like content pyramid. I was like, what is this, like Hova? It's like he's like the Jay-Z of blogging is coming out right now. And so then, like, when it comes to recapping our shows, there are some people who just say, hey, here are the show notes, which I thought, was great enough just for my audience. But now there's this opportunity for you to do like a full blog recap. So what are your thoughts? Can we just get away with just embedding a video and Google's going to give us some love and we'll still rank higher? Or are you just going to like give me the smackdown right now?
It's like, girl, don't do it. Girl, don't do it.
I'm gonna do it.
Yeah. Well, let me give everyone some context, because Google is a computer, right? I mean, people work there, but there isn't any individual who's calling up your individual website and looking at it. They use scripts, they use bots, they use crawlers for that. And those scripts come to your site usually about once a week. Usually spend about a second, literally like a second or less. Boom, hit your site, pop back out, because they want to see what's changed. And what they're looking at is the code. So if you've never done this, open up Chrome. Now or later, doesn't matter. Go to your website, go to somebody else's website, go to view source, and you'll see the script, the HTML code that tells the browser what to actually show somebody. The HTML code has your colors, your graphics, and the text, of course. So that's what Google sees. Google looks at the scripts, not what we see. Google the crawler sees a link to a YouTube video, doesn't consume the video, just sees a link to a YouTube video and then keeps moving. They look and they see an embedded Libsyn podcast. They don't listen to the podcast. They just see the link to the podcast. Then they keep moving on. And eventually, hopefully, they'll get to some text that we actually put in there. So that's the context, right? Google's looking at the text on the page. And so as a live streamer, you have pretty much 3 options, give or take. And I'll tell you, first and foremost, just like, you get this question all the time. What gear should I do? How should I start my show? I've never done a live streaming. And you're like, well, start with the phone, if nothing else, because at least you're going live. You don't have to have a DSLR like we have. You don't have to have the fancy mic. Start with your phone. And I'm going to tell you the same thing. If you're not currently repurposing your live streams into blog posts, at a bare minimum, title of blog post, the title of your show, embed the Facebook or the YouTube stream, wherever it is you broadcast to, and then put in the description, because that at least is a minimum. It's not going to be awesome. That's not a ton of text that Google's going to be like, oh, wow, look at that. No, that's not going to happen, but it's better than nothing. So at least you get into that habit. The next step is use a tool like Descript and get that recap, right? Where you actually have the transcript of the show. So you've got the show notes that some people say, and you can even take that further by cleaning it up. And like I mentioned Descript just now. So when you repurpose your show, you will absolutely make sure that my mention of Descript in the show notes has your affiliate link out to Descript, except wait, they don't do affiliate. Descript, get an affiliate program.
Yeah, so I know. Oh my God. I'm waiting for that. I'm totally waiting for that.
That's totally a no-brainer. But anyways, that's step 2, right? That's like the next level up. You are putting the transcript in there, so there's at least that much text, which then in itself could be pretty awesome, because if we talk for 30 or 60 minutes, we're going to be creating 6,000 to 10,000 words of content. Because I kind of talk kind of fast when I get going on this kind of stuff. So I'm putting a lot of content into this video
to like intercept. Yeah.
And everyone should know that the average blog post is like 1,200 to 1,500 words, right? So if you can publish a recap that's 2,500, 3,000, even 8,000 words, that's getting into this epic 10x level content range. But most people aren't going to actually read the transcript of a video. It's usually not fun to read.
I learned that. Yeah. See, okay. So I'm going to back up a little bit, because Mike knows everything that he knows. And you guys are probably at the same stage where I was, where I'm like, I really want to do this, Mike, but you're overwhelming me. So when I first met Mike, I did the bare bone basics, embed video, title, quick description, done. Right. And then I would have like my one-on-ones with Mike, and he's like, no, you got to add more context into it. And so then back then I was probably using rev.com or otter.ai. And then I dropped the transcript, and I was like, okay, here's a transcript. That was like another like Band-Aid that I was trying to do. And same thing. He's like, nah, girl, why do you keep doing this? And he's like, think about how you consume content. You're not going to sit there and read a transcript. Even if you were, you're probably just going to control find and look for the certain part where they're going to answer a question. So why don't you just pull out that question and put it into your blog post as a new heading with the actual answer, and then turn it into a click to tweet. And then that, ever since then, I'm like, it's changed the whole dynamic of all of the shows that I repurpose. And I really have to like hang my hat to you. Here hat. Because that's where people find me now. It's usually through, if they're not tuning into the show because they've never listened to the show before, they're finding me in Google, and they're finding me in these search results. And then once they realize, hey, this is really great content, then they subscribe to the show, and then they show up live. So which is why you have amazing people like Rose and Robert and Caleb like popping up. So you guys, if you have questions, be sure to drop them in now. I'm just going to give you context. Mike is super freaking smart when it comes to all of this. For those of you that might be feeling a little bit overwhelmed, I'm going to pop in, and I'm just going to tell you like, yep, totally went through that. It's a thing.
Yep, we've been there. We've been through this, and I've been the same way in many other areas of my life. So it's that favor has been returned tenfold. But yeah, to your point, you now do the best best practice, right? This is what you do with your content. You've taken it and you identify, okay, this is what we actually ended up talking about in this particular video. These are the questions that were answered. These are the pain points that were pulled out. And you craft that into an article, which is amazing. So now somebody coming to your site or going to a Google search and looking for how to become a remote live producer, they're going to find your recap of the interview that you did with Miss Flowers, for instance, right? And they're going to learn all it is to know, and they're going to learn it in a way that makes sense to somebody who is Googling information, because somebody's using Google to find something. That means they want to read. If they want to watch a video, they'll go straight to YouTube. I mean, YouTube videos will show up in Google search, don't get me wrong, as will some Facebook videos. And sometimes people will watch a video that shows up in Google search results. But again, 9 times out of 10, if they're using Google, they want to read something quickly. They're usually on their phone.
Yeah, and when you format it too, I'm telling you, like, I'm going to share with you like all the mistakes of what I did when repurposing my content, because some of you only see the repurposed content when it's done. But so even then, like when he's like, just pull out the pain points, Stephanie, and then I did it. I just like put header and then copy, and he's like, but why don't you put any images in between? Why don't you put some embedded stuff? And I was like, this is the longest blog post ever, but it does pay off. And it is one of those things where now other people like Ecamm. So Caleb had reached out and says, people are asking me, Stephanie, how to go live into a Facebook event. And all I'm doing is I'm just sending them over to your blog post. I'm like, win, yay, because that's exactly what I want. And so Mike Robert is asking this question where he's saying, you know, he loves the topic, first of all. And he says, do you recommend the use of transcription tool to pair with the live stream as a read along, or are you advocating a standalone article as separate content? Which I'm thinking the latter is the best. Is you could have the transcript, but when you pull out like the questions where your audience was like, oh my God, that was a knowledge bomb, I think that's going to give more weight and value to your blog post. What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, I totally agree. You're going to want to start with the transcript as the writer, as the editor, whether it's you doing it yourself or you're having an assistant do it for you. Start with the transcript, because that's going to pull the quotes, right? And it's going to give you that text, and you're not going to type anything out. Then you can review that. You might consider including it at the bottom if somebody wants to read it. But again, we know people aren't going to read it. And it's probably best to just pull the great quotes out of that and form the article around it. Now, one thing I'll also mention, because you kind of touched on this and we've said it, if you interview me for an hour, this is going to be an 8,000 to 10,000 word blog post. If it's just a transcript, right? If that feels too long to you, the first thing I'll say is don't be scared, because people aren't afraid of long form content. That's not true. But if you feel like there are so many points covered in this particular interview that it would actually make for multiple good blog posts, do that.
Yeah.
Why not create 4 or 5 blog posts out of a single interview? You're not limited to just one. Nobody's saying, Stephanie, you can only create 1 blog post per interview. There's no rule that says that. You don't want to use the same content over and over again, because Google won't appreciate that, and your audience probably won't appreciate that. But we could have one article just on finding ideas for blog content. We could have another article just for how to structure blog content. Believe me, I've got entire courses on these topics, right? You could have that with every single interview. Scott at our Agorapulse, he's our content scientist. He does these experiments on social media. He started doing live interviews, and he would break them up into 5 podcast episodes. I think he's doing 1 live interview, 1 blog post, 5 podcast episodes, because as an interviewer, you've got questions. We might move around. We might not hit every question, but you've got questions that we've already talked about and figured, okay, these are the main points we want to hit. And with most interviews, there's 5, 6, or 7 main questions, main topics that we want to tackle in this particular show. That's 5 podcasts. Easy.
Yeah. So one thing that I want to bring up, so Caleb is tuning in from LinkedIn, and he's saying, this is smart, by the way. I'm going to steal this from you, Caleb. He says, if you chapter your videos on YouTube, you can also include that portion to your blog as well, which I had to go back to my VA team, because RESTREAM will go live across all of the platforms. And normally when we go out with the description, it doesn't have the blog post recap in there yet. So I was like, hey, once we have the blog post recap, I need you to go back over to YouTube, update the description to then say, for those of you, who just want the tutorial step by step, here you go. And I found that has been super duper helpful.
Absolutely. Now, one of the things we didn't decide we were going to touch on, so you can just say, Mike, I don't want to talk about that. But you mentioned team, right? And we've been talking about all these different things that people should be doing. You should do a live show, and you should promote that live show. And then after that live show, you should get a transcript, and you should clean that up and write a blog post summary of that show, which means you are going to be spending a lot of time doing all these things. And some of you may be thinking, Mike, I don't have that kind of time. So let me help you with that. First, if you aren't already bombarded with clients, then you need to make some time to do some long-term marketing. And content marketing is really long-term marketing. You just mentioned a show that you did about Facebook events, and people are still referencing it. You're giving them that link as a reference. That's helping to drive business to you. And it's a show you did a long time ago. I remember that show. I mean, that was probably 2019. Mm-hmm. So taking the time to do the live show and taking the time to craft it into a blog post is going to pay dividends down the road. I used to blog a lot. And by a lot, I mean 2 or 3 times a day. I used to publish 6 to 14 articles a week.
You are crazy.
I don't have to do that anymore. I don't have to publish that often. I've published once this month.
Yeah.
And that was just because I felt like it. There was some bunch of stuff that came out with Twitter lately. And I was like, you know what? I should write about it because there's spaces and review and all these different things. I don't have to publish every single day. I don't have to publish every week or even every month. And my site is still getting tens of thousands of visitors without me having to touch anything every single month. So investing in yourself, if you're not already bombarded with work, is important. Here's the flip side of that. What if you are really already too busy? You're already overwhelmed with clients. Well, in that case, you need to carve out a little budget for a VA, and you need to go back to Stephanie's episode a couple weeks ago about VAs, because that will help you understand that process, because you need to offload this vital task. Because however you're getting your business today, that pipe might not last.
Exactly.
I don't know if it's Facebook ads. I don't know if it's Twitter. I don't know if it's, some of the kind of, referral engine, email marketing, whatever the case might be. But if you're not investing in long-term marketing, there's always the chance that the things that are driving business today might not be there tomorrow. And if you've been taking the time to create all that content and have that nice archive and reservoir of information that you've shared, that's going to be ultra valuable to you.
Yeah. You know what I was going to say? So Michelle is tuning in and she's saying that she has over 200 blog posts. And I don't even know how many I have on my site right now. I know that Lights Camera Live is probably up to like maybe 80 episodes, which is crazy to say because I've been live streaming for 4 years. And there are people that have just started live streaming this year and they've already hit like their 100th episode. But what I can say that's been so helpful about repurposing the shows into longer form content is when we had to write the book, or when you and I have to speak at a conference, I'm like, I already have this outlined. Like I could literally go onto stage and just move different pieces from different shows where I had presented about it on and just pull that in there and then just make it work, right? And so here's a question from Michelle that I found so interesting because just like you, she comes from a blogging background. But what her pain point is, Mike, is that she finds it difficult to begin with the video content first because she's used to blogging. Is the process the same for repurposing from a blog post?
Yeah, you could absolutely do that. And in fact, I do it all the time because Michelle, like you, I would much rather write. I would so much rather sit in my dark office with music on and write. That's where I'm comfortable. That's where I'm happy. That's the way I enjoy creating content. So when I do need to create my own video, which happens on a regular basis, usually it's for presentations like you just said, or for webinars or course content, that blog post or posts that I've already written can be a script. Just like you just said. Maybe I'll edit it, maybe I won't. It just depends on the article and the circumstance. I wrote a blog post a couple years ago, after we'd been doing the 360 Marketing Squad live shows, we did, I think, like 8 or 10 episodes of those videos. And then I turned it into a podcast. So we had the 360 Marketing Squad live podcast. And as I was doing that, I documented the whole process, everything I did to take each one of those videos and strip out the audio and, create an account on Libsyn and create the accounts on Apple iTunes and so on. I created that blog post and I published it. And 6-8 months later, somebody asked me to speak on that topic. I already had the presentation. I just needed the actual presentation, the deck, because I had the script, right, of everything I did, and I was able to turn that into a video.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Yeah. It's like, I'm even thinking about like Michelle's comment about like starting from a blog post. I have had shows where I was like, man, what am I going to talk about? Or like, what haven't I already talked about? And then if you do have it as a blog post, at least in my case, you already have the structure. Because for me, I think having a structure is what makes a live show so helpful. And then, so I would just take the blog format and then I would integrate for the audience engagement. Like, what's the question of the day? Like, what's your biggest pain point right now when it comes to repurposing your live stream into a blog content? Is it the fact that you don't have a VA or you need a transcription tool? All those things. So when I do that, like even now, just looking at you and reading like the questions and your bio, I have a teleprompter. So honestly, Michelle, if you had like a teleprompter, right? Like you could literally just have like your blog post like right there on your teleprompter next to the camera. And you're like, oh, and this is the headline. So I'm just going to read the headline next and then scroll down. And it makes it so much easier. So I find that to be very helpful.
There's 2 things I want to add to that. The first is that I found it's really important for me to write the way that I speak. I write in a very conversational style, which means you probably wouldn't know right now if I was reading from a text script or if I was just riffing off the top of my head, because quite frankly, I sound the same either way, whether I'm reading or I'm just talking. You don't know. And I put my Evernote, if I'm doing a video and I'm reading a script, I put my Evernote window like really, really close to my screen. I don't have a teleprompter. So I just make it a small window at the top center of my monitor.
You're gonna get
I know I'm gonna get
like,
one.
That's gonna be your Christmas
so
list.
my eyes aren't moving like this, right? I'm still looking at the camera as I'm reading. So there's the first tip. And then I wanted to recall another example, a show that you and I did, I think it was 3 years ago, about GDPR.
Oh, yeah.
We had like a 20,000 word article. I mean, this is a beast piece of content that I'd worked on explaining what in the world GDPR was and what the impact was for businesses. So then we did a video, and we definitely did not read that article. We talked about it and we referenced the article, and we would say, okay, here we talked about, all these different requirements and what does it really mean for businesses here in the US who are maybe working with European consumers. And we referenced the article, and a lot of people could do that as well, is go on a live video, maybe with somebody else, and talk about a topic, and the article is the resource.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay. I want to give a quick shout out to Shalala Productions, who is saying, love the show reminder example. Sometimes I'll put it in the YouTube description reference. Yes, do that. To the previous show, or have a dedicated website of prior shows for replay. This is something that Mike, again, he's the one where I'll be so happy. Yay, I did an episode. Yay, I did a blog post. And then he'll like zoom out, right? Like Google Maps, like zoop. And Stephanie, imagine, what if you did this? And I'm like, more work. But he but he says it with love. And, I push back every now and then because I'm like, yo, I got everything to do right now. And so one of the suggestions that he gave me that I finally put into practice was on lightscameralive.com. I now have my episode page, and then I have a sliding image gallery that shows all the 3 different shows that I have. And then I have the calendar subscription right below it, because for me, if it's not on their calendar, then I know that they don't know, right? I can't rely on Facebook notifications and YouTube notifications for you guys to show up. So if you put it on your calendar, and then you could at least plan around it, right? So it goes slider image, subscribe to the notifications via the calendar, and then it has the blog recap. So Shalala Productions, like every time now I'm on a show and people are like, where can people find you? I give them the shortened URL, which is lightscamera.live/subscribe. And then they see all the content. They're like, oh, snap. Like this person is putting out content consistently. I could have them on my calendar. That for me, that was like my 2021 level up, right? I was like, okay, this is like year 5 into live streaming now. It's time for me to be like serious about that. Do you want to add anything to that? I'm like pulling back the curtain, like confessional, like
Yeah.
it was a whole thing just to repurpose my stuff. And yesterday when I was hanging out with Caleb, Kelly Noble Mirabella, and
Molly Mahoney.
Molly Mahoney, they're like, you are the repurposing queen. I was like, let me tell you, friends, it took me a while to get there because I was just like one live stream and done, boom. But then as I started to trust Mike and listen to him, right? Then all these like really cool things started to happen because Google was finding me, potential clients were able to search for certain keywords, and people are like, hey, you already have all of this blog content about this topic. Can you now write a book, or can you come and speak at our corporate event? Which, Michelle says that she's never looked at her blog post, and I'm like, that's an opportunity. She's a math teacher, and she teaches math to teachers on how to teach it better, if I remember that correctly. So yeah. She said, well, you all just solved my problem. That's what we're here for.
That's what we're here for. Now, to be fair to you, it wasn't just you being, stubborn and I don't want to do what Mike says. Not at all. Everything we do is a learning process. It's a muscle. I talk about that with blogging all the time, right? And you talk about, these blogging muscles that we've got to exercise and work out and get bigger and better. I can't expect somebody who's never written a blog post to crank out a 10,000 word pillar piece tomorrow. It's not going to happen. They start smaller. They start with 200 word posts, 750 word posts, 1,200 posts. Same with a live streamer who is starting with OBS and then graduating up to Ecamm. And, now you've got multi-streaming with Restream and studios and graphics and all these kind of things. If I'm starting with live streaming tomorrow, which is a lot of your audience is going to be doing, there's a learning curve to every single aspect of live streaming. Yeah. I got to learn the platforms. I got to learn what it means to be on camera and to have that presence. And there's the equipment and the lighting and everything. So I get it. I would never expect somebody to just immediately start to churn out the level of quality and the repurposing quantity that you're doing today. So for those of you listening and watching and hoping to learn, what we're showing you is the blueprint for moving forward. You can start with just embedding the video into a blog post so that at least it's there. And then as time permits, as you grow more comfortable with this live streaming platform and you grow more comfortable with your blog platform and you grow more comfortable with your graphic design tools, well, then we can start to add on and layer on additional techniques and tools like transcript services and taking the time to optimize for search, because all of it will be rewarding and all of it's going to come in time.
Someone was just asking, how do you create an automatic transcript of your show? Which Caleb, Mike, and I will all scream, Descript. Descript is the best thing ever. Honestly, Jim, if you haven't seen the first episode of Digital Confetti, I walk you through the whole entire process of that's where it all begins. We have a video first strategy. We take that video, boom, goes into Descript, transcribes it. Team runs with it to do a blog post. They create the 5 social media videos to repurpose. It could be square, 16:9 stories, all the things. It's absolutely been amazing. Oh, hey, look, they hit the subscribe button. Yay! But you know what I was going to say is even in just, it worked. Even in just speaking to you, not only am I thinking of how this could be repurposed for other people that are struggling with repurposing their content like Michelle, but also just writing about what I've learned over the past couple of years. When I did the bare bone basics of just embedding the video, title, and description, these are the results that I had. And then the next year, when I was able to hire a VA, remember, watch that episode, right? Then the blog recaps got longer and then new opportunities started to come about. And I think that the more that you're able to show off your level of expertise in different formats and in different mediums, the more opportunities are going to come to you. And so, Mike, we've talked about like blogging on your own website, which I think is smart because you want to direct people over to your site. But what about these other publishing channels where you could be discovered, like a Medium or a LinkedIn? Do you have anything that you want to add about that?
Yeah, you definitely want to avoid going to these free, non-owned publishing sites exclusively or primarily. So you mentioned Medium, right? Where you can go to medium.com and you can sign up for a free blog and you can just blog on Medium, but you don't own that. They could shut down your account tomorrow and there's literally nothing you can do about it. And you might say, oh, they're not going to shut down my account. I'm not doing anything wrong. The fact of the matter is, Medium itself could go away tomorrow. Don't believe me? There was a site called Posterous in 2014. It was a blogging site, about 100 million bloggers. Twitter bought them, just like Twitter bought Vine. And shortly thereafter, Twitter shut them down because they couldn't figure out how to make them profitable. And they decided to just cut their losses. Every single blogger on Posterous had to find a new home for their content. And that is not a fun thing to go through, let me tell you. So you definitely want to own your site like you do with your lightscameralive.com. It's in a Squarespace account. I've got a couple of different WordPress sites. I'm hosted with SiteGround. If I have to, I can move them all to a completely different host. I could migrate the content to a different platform if I wanted to, but I own it. It's mine. Nobody can take it away from me. I can back it up as often as I want to. Now, that said, that's the primary place where we want to put all of our episodes, all of our blog posts, all of our content. It does make sense sometimes to either syndicate, where we actually take the entire article and we publish it on a second place. Yeah. And it also makes sense to summarize and try to leverage some of these other places because they have audiences. There's people who only use Medium. Publishing to LinkedIn is great because you can attract a different audience there. And we've had the benefit of being able to write for Entrepreneur. So if you can write for a company like that, that's golden. But most of those places, they're going to want unique content. So here's where it really is helpful to have the blog content. Because if you've been doing this with your shows, like you've got 80 episodes, you've got 80 recaps and 80 different episodes where you've pulled out the best, juiciest nuggets and quotes from those guests. You could think up a topic and you could probably think of 10 or 12 episodes where you've had really, really smart guests talking about that topic. You already have quotes. You already have the makings of a perfect article for Entrepreneur right there on your site.
And that's been the fun part, is that when I've been writing these guest post articles on these bigger platforms, sometimes I could sneak by linking back to lightscameralive.com, which is amazing and fun. And then also for the guests that I have across all the shows, right? Some of them actually have media pages. And so on the media pages, like even on my website, I will say I appeared on this show with Winnie Sun, right? And then I would link to the actual replay so people know that, you know, I'm still speaking, I'm doing all these different things. And so the people that are guests on my show are now linking back to my site. And I never had strategically thought about that, but then I realized, hey, that is an added benefit, because when I am repurposing the content for a guest, saying, here's a blog post, here's the social media videos, here are the gifts that we've created for you, here's like an image graphic. Now they're always linking back to the original interview on my website, because they would rather, I find that my guests would rather share the link to the website because has everything. It's like a la carte, choose whatever it is that you want to have, versus going over to YouTube or over into Facebook. So it's been really interesting, I would say, and so beneficial. So thank you, Mike.
You're welcome. But yeah, it's the kind of thing that you don't think about when you're starting, and we've all been there. When I published my first blog post many years ago, I never assumed that I would be a published author. I never assumed that I would be guest posting for Entrepreneur and being a guest interviewee on shows like Lights, Camera, Live and Digital Confetti and so on. I never assumed that. I was just like, oh, okay, I know a little bit about social media, so I'm going to write about it. Yeah. But it helps to know that if you're successful, other people will appreciate the spotlight that you're able to shine on them, and they will want to share your great work.
Something that I want to add to is there are these other live streamers that have reached out because I find that the live streaming community, we're all about helping each other, right? And there are times where a new content creator or even someone who's been in the game for a long time, like you and I have a friend who has spoken at the same conferences that we have. And he reached out and he's like, Stephanie, I go live more than you. He wasn't trying to like rub salt or anything. He's like, I go live as often as you do, but I don't have these opportunities like you. So, WTF, like, what's up? Like, what's the difference that makes the difference? And he's a good friend of ours. And I was like, you know what? I found that when I started to repurpose the content, these companies, these businesses were then able to pitch me better internally. Because when they're trying to pitch like, hey, we want to launch this course and we want to have this person cover it, when they're forwarding the proposal, they're not saying, okay, watch this 45-minute YouTube video on how this person presents. They're like, no, look at this body of work that this content creator has developed, the audience and all the things. And I think that really helped a lot. And honestly, for those of you, there might be like a live streamer or content creator where they might have already covered it. I mean, there are many times where I reached out to Mike and I'm like, oh, but our friend already talked about it. They're like, but you can do it differently. You can deliver it in a different way. And knowing that you already have the process to repurpose the content, your content will have much more longevity because that person is a flash in the pan, went live, gets buried because that person goes live every single freaking week and doesn't repurpose their content whatsoever. And I was like, that's true. That's where it's going to be the biggest thing for me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and this is why you only going live with your main show twice a month, these other shows, on a regular basis, but not having to go live every single day. That's totally great. That's fine. You're putting out such great content on a regular basis, and you're hitting new topics, and you're talking to new people. So you're expanding your audience every single time. That's gold.
Yeah. It's interesting because my good friend Gary Ware, we always have this joke that like sometimes it's the smallest things that make like the biggest impact, so you don't have to show up every day, on camera. You don't have to go live every single week because for a long time I had that imposter syndrome of like, oh, I only go live twice a month. But he's like, Stephanie, it's like when you go camping, right? And then you get bit by a mosquito, but it's this little tiny thing. And you're like, oh, it's just a little mosquito bite. It's not going to bug me. And then an hour later, it's like this big, it's like this big throbbing, cannot be ignored. And so that's what I feel like repurposing is. It's this little small thing that makes like such a huge impact that cannot be ignored, that people just cannot look away. And they're like, every time I search for this word, you pop up, whether it's going to be on Google or on YouTube, or if I ask in a Facebook group and someone else is quoting you from an article or referencing your show, that's where I'm just like, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, for those of you watching, I mean, we're not just talking like theoretical. If you Google remote live producer, Stephanie's interview about being a remote live producer comes up number one, or within the first few results, and it's the blog recap that's being listed there.
I think that for me was the part where I was like, how is the blog recap outperforming the show? Because you think about like, there's all these elements that I put into the show, the intro, the bios, and then the blog recap comes in with like, it just crushes it. And so I think, Lights, Camera, Live, that whole entire format, it's what the team completely runs with now. I've dropped adding the transcript because I figured, what you said, no one's really going to read the transcript. However, I still upload the SRT file for those that are hard of hearing so that they could at least hear it. It's another added benefit of actually transcribing your videos, and then pulling the pain points from it. So this has been fun. Thanks for geeking out with me. I don't think I've actually ever really talked about the whole journey of repurposing and the pain points from all of that. And it looks like we've also inspired Michelle. She says that Michelle, like honestly, like episode number 1, I'm revealing to you everything that happens with like Descript. And there, I can't tell you how many times I've looked over at Mike. I'm like, dude, check out this new thing that Descript can do. Like, it's a complete game changer. Oh, Efrany is saying like, who reads transcripts? Okay. Funny thing. So the only time I really read transcripts is when I have to do like quarterly reports for clients to understand what's happening with like Facebook or any of the other social media platforms. Cause then I want to listen to the earnings call. So I will read that transcript because there are some things that the media outlets don't report on. And so we're already in March. I mean, I was just reading the earnings call for Facebook about what they're doing to see if they're trying to plan anything new for live streaming. Anyway.
But here's the thing about transcripts, because some people will say, oh, all right, you had a 60-minute video and that was 8,000 words. And so if I put that 8,000 word transcript onto the blog post, Google will see that text. Mike said Google crawls the text, and it's absolutely true. Google will see that text, and Google, if the right words are mentioned in the interview, which is why it's important to have good focus interviews, your content will rank higher for that particular keyword. But here's the problem. Google's ranking your content higher because of the amount of text and the frequency of the keyword that you mentioned. But it's not Google that's actually going to your site to read, to learn, to take an action. That's a human being. So it's important to recognize that they have a question that they're trying to have answered, and maybe it's answered within that transcript. But if it's halfway through an 8,000 word transcript, they're not going to be able to find it. This is where that summary and recap becomes so important. And if it's a longer interview, I would even go so far as to have a little table of contents at the top, which is actually, you can pretty easily link specific questions and topics to specific points in the recap or even the transcript if you want to. And that will give the reader the information that they're looking for. And that's actually really important, because if Google starts sending people to your post because the information is there, but people can't find it, so they click that back button, they're not going to keep sending people to that page anymore. It's going to go back down in the rankings. So answer the question if you can, as quickly as you can.
That's true. Yeah. Man, this has been so much fun. Now I feel like I've just had a report card.
You get straight A's.
Of like, hey, let's talk about your progress and all that other stuff. Because here's the thing is that when people find out that you could take one live stream video and repurpose it in 94 different ways, and you're like, oh, you can make a GIF and a story, and you could actually download the thumbnails from Facebook, hint, hint, they get excited about that. And then when I say, oh, and remember the blogging piece of it, they're like, womp, womp. And I was like, dude, I know that was me. That was me. But then at least now, which this is like the whole buffet story that you and I have, where I'm like, but look, now there's these new opportunities, because you could have these blog posts turn into a table of contents. So like you and I something happened and we were like, oh, here's a table of contents ideas. And we're like, because we already have blog posts that we could fill in and we could repurpose and remix. And yeah, it's been fun. Anyway, Shawnee says, thank you. Awesome nuggets. Funny story, Shawnee, right before this live stream, I was making chicken nuggets for my daughter. So apparently maybe you were listening to us. Kathleen Schmidt says that she is one of those weirdos that actually reads the transcripts. I'm actually on the same board as you, but I usually do that for earnings calls. Shalala Productions, thank you so much for hanging out. They said, thanks again for the massive knowledge drop and the much needed candor of how it's normal that it can feel overwhelming. Yeah, it is overwhelming. I'm not going to lie in the sense that I do it all by myself. I don't do it all by myself. Like when I say that I reach out to Mike and I'm like, hello, brain, how are you today? Did you have your coffee? Cool. Can you just review this for me? I have...
Not an exaggeration.
Not an exaggeration. No. Lean on people. If this is one of those things where it's like, sometimes I'm like on autopilot, I'm just trying to get from one task to the other task. So I might not have like the craziest and the sexiest title. So again, hello brain. Can you give me an idea for this? And like he's all like, okay, Stream Deck hotkey, Google Keyword Planner here, here's an idea. And it comes out so well. I think find yourself a group that can help you with that. If you're not already in Mike's blogging content planner group, what's the official name for it again? The
We
group that you
have
have?
the blogging brute squad.
Yeah. So the
Yeah,
blogging
be
brute
in the
squad,
blogging brute
because
squad.
you actually offer support for content creators on how to structure their
Yeah.
content, and you have your blogging boot camp, which is that happening anytime soon?
Yeah, well, it's available on demand. And in fact, I'm
Oh,
in the middle of updating it so people can get the blogging bootcamp today. It's 10 modules of how to create a content strategy. And it's only $97 today because within about a month or two, I'm going to have it totally migrated to Thinkific, cleaned up, polished videos, and it's going to go up in price because there's going to be a lot more content. So get it now, and you'll have access
yeah.
to the updated version when it comes out.
And so you have things like blogging topics covered. So how to structure content for traffic, leads, and sales, how to come up with and brainstorm blog ideas, how to spend less time writing and still write better, how to optimize blog posts for peak performance, how to promote blog. Man, you guys, everything is in here. I'm just going to put this in the chat. That's what I love about Restream is that I could actually just put it in the chat for you guys, and then it'll go across all of the networks. P.S. By the way, I want to give a quick shout out over to Restream, who has helped power this show for us. That way we could share this wonderful knowledge with you from the Blogging Brute. Blogging Bootcamp is totally on demand. I'm lucky in the sense that he is also my business partner and my co-author, so I could just hit him up in the DMs. You can't. So you have to go to the Blogging Bootcamp. You're not allowed to hit him up in the DMs, but I can. But if you're in the Blogging Bootcamp for $97, you could have your own second brain to help you out with all of this stuff. And anything else that you want to add about your boot camp? I mean, you get a lot of praise for all the stuff that you do.
Yeah, I would just say that it also comes with a workbook, which I found to be so, so important. We've talked about doing the keyword planning and the strategizing and all that sort of thing, but you're not going to remember that stuff a day later. So I crafted this workbook where you can actually write down those ideas, and it helps kind of guide you through that whole content pyramid process and the keyword research process. And that honestly is the number one thing that's going to make writing so much easier. And even coming up with ideas for live videos, you can still have a video first strategy and go through this boot camp and learn the content that you need for your site. But having those ideas in place, I know I want to cover these topics. That means I know I'm either going to write about these things or I'm going to find guest interviews who can come in and really knock it out of the park on those topics.
Yeah, so this is the blogging planner that he also has. You could get it from Amazon. I actually like having the hard copy, which is really nice. You could also download the original one on his website. But I don't know, there's something about just having that thud value of like, you are responsible for filling this out is really super helpful. So you could find that on Amazon and all the other things that he does, because he's absolutely amazing. Mike, just want to give you a quick shout out to Annette McDonald, our good friend, founder of Easel. She is here in the audience with us. But other than that, Shawnee said, laugh out loud. No fair that I get to slide into your DM. Totally true. Totally true. That's what I'm telling you. This is where you got to go. You got to go over here, or you're going to go over to the blogging bootcamp, because that's where you could find, because you have the Facebook group and they post questions in there. Because yeah. Awesome. Well, Mike, thank you so much for being a wonderful, wonderful guest here on Digital Confetti. For those of you that are just tuning in now, maybe you came back from lunch, we had talked about all the reasons why you want to repurpose your live stream in order to rank higher. This is an episode that you are going to want to bookmark. And because we don't only just talk the talk, we walk the walk. Yes, we will go ahead and repurpose this content for you, and I will sell it for $19.97. No. All right, friends. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. We will talk to you later. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Okay, so about that question. No, I'm just kidding.